Hannity tonight, the political outsider, insurgent candidates continue to dominate in the latest 2016 polls, and Hillary Clinton is now losing in head-to-head matchups with some GOP candidates in very key states. Fox and Friends First, co-host Ainsley Earhart at the Hannity Big Board tonight. Yeah. A lot of big numbers, a lot of movement.
Just looking over these numbers, you're going to be shocked, Sean. Let me tell you and your viewers, voters in two very important states continue to throw their support behind Republican candidates who come from outside of Washington and have never held public office. In Iowa, Donald Trump and Dr. Ben Carson continue to separate themselves from the rest of the field with 24% and 19%. Carly Fiorina is in third place with 8%, followed by Jeb Bush, Ted Cruz, and then Marco Rubio. As for New Hampshire, Sean, things are a little tighter in that state. Trump still has the top spot with 21%, and then Carly Fiorina continues to gain momentum with 16%. Jeb Bush has 11%, followed by Marco Rubio and Ben Carson with 10%, and then Chris Christie has 7%. Now, Sean, another national poll, a new one, has some very good news for Dr. Ben Carson. It shows him leading Donald Trump 24% to 17%. It is a very good sign for Dr. Carson, but we're going to have to wait until all these other polls come out to see if the trend continues, of course. Now, also tonight, Sean, Hillary Clinton's ongoing scandals, they continue to drag her down in the polls, and it's starting to show in a potential head-to-head matchup with notable GOP candidates. This is where it gets interesting. In New Hampshire, Hillary Clinton would fall to Jeb Bush by 7 points if they were to square off in the general election. And Sean, Carly Fiorina would top Clinton by 8 points if voters had to decide between those two candidates. And then in the all-important state of Iowa, Sean, Clinton would lose to Trump by 7 points, Bush by 10, and Fiorina would beat her by a whopping 14 points. Finally tonight, Clinton unveiled her new plans for new gun control measures at an event in New Hampshire, and here is part of what she said earlier today.
It's time for us to say, wait a minute, we're better than this. Our country is better than this. And there are steps we can take that improve gun safety and further the prevention of violence by guns. And today, I am proposing what I consider to be common sense approaches.
All right, Sean, there you have it. Back to you.
All right, Ainsley, thanks so much. Ainsley will be back with more numbers later in the program. Joining me now with more, author of the brand new book, A More Perfect Union, What the People Can Do to Reclaim Our Constitutional Liberties, the man himself, 2016 Republican presidential candidate, Dr. Benjamin Carson. How are you, Dr. Carson? Good to see you.
Always good to be with you.
Look at these numbers. It's Trump, it's you, it's Fiorina. What is happening out in the electorate? What are you hearing when you meet people?
First of all, I hear people saying to me constantly, please, don't let them change you. Be who you are. Don't back down. Believe in what you believe in. That's so important because people are used to double talk, and they're used to politicians saying whatever is politically expedient and having their finger up in the air and seeing which way the wind is blowing. Right now, they're looking for something that they can truly believe in. They're looking for people who have actually worked in the real world, have real-world accomplishments, demonstrate that they know how to solve complex problems. No. And I think that's resonating with politics.
It's interesting. In most polls, it's Trump and then you. I can't think of two more diametrically opposed personalities, you being more shy and demure and soft-spoken, and then Donald Trump being brash and outspoken and confident. That's interesting to me. But the one thing you have in common is you've never held political office. Fascinating.
We've not held political office, but I think the thing that's important to the people is that we're not looking like people who are going to be corralled by the political establishment.
Understood. It's interesting. You wrote this book, and you spend a lot of time in the book talking about fidelity to our Constitution. And I don't care if the issue is same-sex marriage, the Second Amendment, executive orders, taxation, freedom of religion. You're viewing every one of these important issues through the prism of the Constitution. Explain that.
Well, you know, I talk about in the book, or we talk about, because my wife is the co-writer, and my wife is an excellent writer. But the fact of the matter is, we talked about how it was formed and what the basis of it was, and the kinds of people who were involved in writing it, and the friction that occurred in the writing of it and how they were able to resolve these things. And these men were incredibly bright, and they were able to see into the future and think about all the things that were possibly going to happen, and to write a Constitution with the help of God, by the way. A lot of people don't know that.
Isn't that fascinating through this discussion? If they had the fight over slavery at that time, the nation wouldn't have been formed. That's my reading of history.
That's correct.
All right. So, but they did put in place in their wisdom, which I think you're talking about here, the mechanism to right wrongs and correct injustices.
Yes.
Over time.
And they recognized that they were not perfect, and that the document itself was not perfect, and that it would have to adjust with time. There are a lot of things that we need to think about now. For instance, you know, when we wrote the Constitution, the average age of death was around 47.
Yeah, because of surgeons like you, you're keeping us around a little longer. I'm past my due date then. That means...
Right, which means lifetime appointments perhaps need to be reviewed again.
Interesting. Now, I want to ask you, because you've been on the campaign trail, when you say something, like the comment you made about Muslims, the media explodes. And I had you on the program right after that. I said, do you mean you would want to know that they do not adhere to Sharia or radicalization? And you said, that's what I meant. Has that been a problem on the campaign trail, media turning a small comment into a bigger issue?
Well, it hasn't been a problem with the people. It's been a problem with the left-wing media, although I've asked several of them, so are you telling me that you would like to have a president who believed in Sharia, who believed in taqiyya, who believed in all of the various components?
The antithesis of the Constitution, which you're right about.
And, of course, they immediately divert to another topic at that point because they don't want to admit it.
Do you find it's all gotcha? I watched the last CNN debate. You stood on your feet for 3 hours. You said this about him, and he said that about you. Go fight it out. And you did get substance out, but I felt that the whole debate was designed to make you guys fight.
It was, and that's why I largely didn't participate, because I'm not going to let somebody sit there and pull my string and say, oh, sick 'em, you know.
Let me ask you this question. You said something to me earlier today that really shocked me, that you were unhappy you never get asked a foreign policy question. Is that true in both debates? You weren't asked a foreign... I don't know for sure.
Yeah, they have a tendency not to ask me about foreign policy,
well,
not to ask me about economics. They assume that the only thing you know is maybe something about race and maybe something about medicine.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you. You see what Vladimir Putin is doing, and his influence, he seems to be filling a vacuum left by the United States. You see that his first attack in Syria was not against ISIS, but it was against American-backed rebels that want to depose Assad.
Correct.
That seemed to be by design. That was almost a proxy attack on the United States from my position. What are your thoughts, and how would you handle it?
Well, my thoughts are that he really was very disappointed with the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and he wants to rebuild an empire, and he needs to extend his influence widely, and he is noticing that there is weakness, and therefore, like any bully, he's going to continue to push. And I believe that we need to stand up to him.
How? How would you specifically, if you're president, what would you do?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't listen to his general saying, you guys can't fly here anymore.
Can you imagine that?
I would say, not only can we fly, but you need to go take a flying leap. You know, not a problem.
In other words, you'd be willing to create a confrontation where you say, we were here first, you're not going to get in our way?
Absolutely.
And if he wants a showdown?
And I would establish a no-fly zone along the Turkish border. And, you know, I wouldn't respect any of the boundaries that they set. And I would also know that his relationships go way, 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 way back, you know. 1968 at Patrice Lumumba University, that's when Putin first got to know the Ali Khomeini and also Mahmoud Abbas. And all of these relationships are very, very complex. We have to stop him wherever he is. We have to stop him in the Baltic Basin, all around that entire, not just the Baltic states, but the whole basin, all of Eastern Europe.
The problem, Western Europe is dependent on their energy, so...
And we can stop them there because we have abundant energy.
We do.
Yo. Oh. Got